All right, peace. This is part two about a three-part lecture that shows and proves that Freemasonry and black slavery started in Egypt, ancient Egypt. All right, it's educational purposes only. I don't agree with everything said here, but let's go.
1778, then a mutant barbarian like Napoleon came in 1798 and lined up 21 cannons and decided to blow the nose off as documented in Los Angeles Times because of his African features. And now Sheldon Peck, July 3rd, 1992, came out and said, the space may really be a black African. Oh, really? With a white face off here. Thus, the space is likely a facial representation of the black African, considering the people of the ancient Egyptians derived from the ancestors of mixture of African and Mediterranean. No, there were no mixture, no African and Mediterranean. These were pre-dynastic African time periods. But they go on to say facial soft tissue analysis of this fabled man lion would support a much earlier origin of the Sphinx when Africans, they say, may have dominated the region. No, they dominated the region because even a man named Count Boney, in his book called Ruins of the Empire, that Thomas Jefferson refused to be published in the United States. He made this statement because at that time Thomas Jefferson said we were 3/5 of a human being and inferior and had nothing to do with this. They were stealing us and the knowledge too. The Count Boney makes this statement, and working upon a journey to Egypt, and the year 1783, the slave trade was at its zenith, and he made a discovery about the African race that would forever change this outlook. All the inhabitants had bloated face, puffed up eyes, flat nose, and thick lips. I was attempting to attribute to climate, but when I visited the Sphinx, his appearance gave me the key to the riddle. On seeing that head, typically Negro as they were using then, and all its features, I remember the remarkable passage where Herodotus in the 5th century BC says, as for me, I judge the Chaldeans to be a colony of Egyptians, because like them, they are black with woolly hair. In other words, the ancient Egyptians were true Negroes of the same type of all native-born Africans. Just think that this race of black men, that they are enslaved, and the object of our scorn is the very race to which we owe our arts, sciences, even the use of speech. Just imagine, finally, there's a missing people who call themselves the greatest springs of liberty and humanity, that one has approved the most barbarious slavery and question whether black men have the same intelligence as whites. But yet we go on and look at this and see, sure, Count Boney was right, because you look at the prognostic jaw of these pre-dynastic Horus kings, and you can align them with the pre-dynastic Africans, or align them with the Twats today, and show that they were the same people who migrated down to now and built this colossal right here. Let's go into now a time period called the Archaic period. The Archaic period that Marin Jehudi gave it 5,700 years BC, that many European Egyptologists could not deal with it and came up with 3,200 years BC. And I don't like to use the term Egyptology because that was started during the time of white supremacy. I like to do it as Dr. J would call it, Kemetology. But let's go on to see that this African, on his palate and Kemet, it shows him in a procession with his placenta to show that the placenta of his mother was from the royal African throne, and he's walking in that procession to show that he had the right to take the throne because Africa is a matrilineal system. This is the African who is known as a Simatawi. A Simatawi is the unifier of the land because he unified Kemet, because even during his time, Kemet was hit with invasions out of the desert. This is an African who started hydraulic engineering, but yet our children go to college and not one word is mentioned of this African who started hydraulic engineering. This is an African who set up a capital dedicated to the architect of the universe, Ptah, called Het-Ka-Ptah, the house of Ptah, that the Greeks took from that and made Egyptic Gus, where we get the name Egypt from. Let's look into even further and see that now we're into the Old Kingdom of the 3rd dynastic period. We're talking around a time period around 2,800 years BC. This Grand Master, Zoser-Nefertiti, these are the African Grand Masters of civilization. No matter where you are in this room, he's looking at you because our ancestors believe his spirit shines through the eyes. His nose has been hacked out too, but he got the post speech, the divine beard, and the nimbus crown of African people. But he commissioned a multi-genius Grand Vizier, architect, astronomer, physician, architect, Imhotep, to build him the greatest structure on the planet Earth and the world's first stone building in Saqqara, known as the Step Pyramid. Still, they can't even figure out how this first pyramid was built. And it was the first stone building above ground. His father also built the first stone building under the ground. But let's look at this even further, brothers and sisters, to see, as you see the Step Pyramid almost 5,000 years ago, but yet We going to Mount Moriah. Masons going to Mount Moriah to see Solomon's temple, and they'll show you a field that used to be here. There's no used to be here. Here's the stone buildings of the Grand Masters right here. But yet, to show you what multicultural is doing to us, let's see how white folks have corrupted it. Now they will say, Museum of Jewish Heritage. And a step pyramid of our ants. There are no Jews here. Jews had nothing to do with this. That's why they're trying to make it a multicultural and destroy our story, because we are now going to the final emancipation of our mind now. Let's look at this now. It has nothing to do with no Jewish heritage. These are Ashkenazi Jews living in the Caucasus Mountains. Had nothing to do with that, who were, according to the Josephus, who lived around 37 to 100 AD, these were the Hyksos, who invaded our land, that I deal with in my African history versus biblical myths. Another lecture for another time. And then they go on to say a living memorial to the Holocaust. Has nothing to do with that whatsoever. But the Grand Master that built this first stone building, step pyramid, was the Grand Master himself, this black man, Imhotep. This African right here. These are the Grand Masters that they don't want our children and our babies to know about. That's why we have to build our own schools for the emancipation of our future generations of our minds here. This is an African, long before some man named William Harvey knew the circulation of the blood, Imhotep knew the circulation of the blood. Long before some Eratosthenes, the Athenian that they're telling our children, who gave us supposedly the circumference of the earth, the 25,000 miles of the circumference of the earth, Imhotep, who studied the winter solstice and the summer solstice, gave us the circumference of the earth almost 5,000 years ago, long before some Eratosthenes. This is an African who was a physician, long before some Hippocrates. But yet our children are told that Hippocrates was the first father of medicine. But yet Imhotep predated Hippocrates by over 2,000 years. These are the stories that they don't want us to know in the African Nile Valley, brothers and sisters. This Grand Master, Astronomer, Architect, Grand Vizier, High Priest, Kari hair, Imhotep, this black man. Let's go on reading the sacred scroll sitting on the square. But yet if I was to take you back to the Quran or the House of Life, where the Western world gets its concept of hospital from, you would see that his head has been knocked off, so the world would not see this black man, who was the architect, Grand Vizier, Grand Master, long before the Western world had any Grand Masters, and still don't have none. This African black man, Imhotep, sitting on the square that we will deal with in just a few minutes. Scottish Rite Building in Los Angeles. Here they got Imhotep, didn't even bother to put his name, Asclepius, they put Imhotep, and even put Imhotep and Zoser. This is a Grand Master who built the world's first stone building, but brothers who are Masons know nothing about Imhotep. They can only tell us about Hiram-Abip, who built for Solomon. And Hiram-Abip is second to Imhotep and Zoser on this temple in the Scottish Rite Building in Los Angeles. So before Hiram-Abip and Solomon of 900 years BC, Imhotep goes back to 2,700 years BC. These were the first sons of light, whose knowledge was activated through the mind, that we must open up our minds. We are the ones who started this. These were the Grand Masters. Right here in the northeast corner, where the light of the world came right here, where they crossed the burning sands to get the knowledge right from African people. In fact, going into the Quran, or the House of Light, as you walk in, you see these cobras rising up. And Ra, the sun, called Ra-Harake, was the key energy to activate something called the pineal gland to bring out spiritual consciousness. This is even where you get the medical association symbol from. As you see right here with the wings and the cobras rising up to activate the pineal gland to bring out spiritual consciousness, that you even see the African mystery system. The African spiritual mystery system is right there in the Bible. Genesis chapter 32, verse 30 and 31. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face and my life is preserved. 31, and as he passed over Peniel, the sun, S-U-N, rose upon him and he halted upon his thigh. Means the sun rose upon him, hit him in his forehead, he halted upon his thigh. Where did it come from? Let's go back to King Tutankhamun's shrine. Sun rising upon him, hits his pineal gland, he halts upon his thigh because he met God face to face. When you see it ends up right here in Genesis chapter 32, verse 31, and as he passed over pineal, the sun rose upon him, he halted upon his thigh. Taken from your African ancestors' shrines right here. And then they're going to call us sun worshipers. We were not sun worshipers. The sun was the key energy to activate the spiritual consciousness of the pineal gland so we can see God face to face. And in anatomy course of the day, they tell you that the pineal gland has no purpose. May not have no purpose to white folks, But it definitely has purpose for black people because it has melanin inside of that melanin. There is the melanin that the first people on the planet Earth. This is the living perpendicular of the rising up and the resurrection again long before some harem of them. Let's go on and see, brothers and sisters, our brother coming between Ra, showing the key energy to activate the pineal gland that we even took to India. That's why we put the red dot right in the middle of our head, showing this was the seat of the soul. This was corrupted by the Rosicrucians and others. This is where you see they got the Shaktas rising up to activate the light of the mind of the pineal gland, and 13 stars representing transformation and rebirth. And then they're going to give us little white angels in the angelical realm, when in fact it was the pineal gland in the brain. This was the concept that they set up in 1776 in the barbarian society called the Illuminati. That was copied from African people who were the illuminators. That was through knowledge. Once your mind is opened up through the pineal gland, that would breathe the light of knowledge that was started right here in Africa. This is what they have not wanted us to open up, our mind, brothers and sisters. What do we know about this African Grand Master of the 4th dynastic period, around 2600 years BC, Akhet Khufu? Akhet Khufu built the greatest structure on the planet Earth, known as the Great Pyramid. 7 million tons of masonry, 2,300,000 stones put in exact position from the base to the top, originally 481 feet. 2,300,000 stones. But yet those Gothic churches in Europe, all of them can fit comfortably down inside of the Great Pyramid. Take all the Gothic and medieval churches of Europe, still doesn't make up the masonry of the Great Pyramid. The pyramid was called Kweti, the great light that the Greeks corrupted in the pyramid, that means house of fire. Each equilateral plane representing air, earth, fire, and water, where Sultan Hassan came and tore off the white limestone to build buildings around Cairo. Even Herodotus in 450 BC, when he came in, he saw the white limestone that covered the pyramid. Built by this Grand Master right here named Khufu. But yet Masons talk about Ham of Fifth. Why can't we talk about Khufu? Built the greatest structure still in our face today. You can't go to Mount Orion and find no Solomon's temple there. But yet you see the Giza Plateau. You see the pyramids of Khufu, Khafra, Menkaure. No, I'm not saying the Greek names that they call Cheops, Shiphren, and miscellaneous. I mean, listen to those names. But say Khufu. Now say Cheops. Now what's that sound like versus Khufu? Khufu was the Grand Master right here. But our ancestors, brothers and sisters, were building these pyramids on cosmic law. From the Zep Tepi of the first time they knew what they were building, the blueprint was already there. This was the spiritual cosmic connection, because many Europeans couldn't figure out. They said, well, they were not Grandmaster builders, because if they were Grandmaster builders, why is it that Khufu and Khafra's pyramid is the perfect alignment and Menkaure's pyramid is off alignment? They didn't understand that this was a spiritual cosmic connection. The pyramids of Khufu, Khafra, and Menkaure corresponded to the 3 stars in Orion's belt called Al-Nilam, Al-Natek, and Menteca. This was the purpose. This was the spiritual connection that our ancestors had with the spiritual universe, brothers and sisters. These pyramids were built with cosmic laws, brothers and sisters, connecting heaven and earth. This is what's locked up in our genetic memory bank. This is what is here. Let's look at this now and see that our ancestors was on a spiritual cosmic connection. What did Orion represent? What was the spiritual connection with this cosmic spiritual connection that our ancestors saw in our Zep Tepi of the first time? Here they saw in the Tahuti text. And the Tahuti text, it says that Tahuti told the student Greek Asclepius that Egypt was in the image of heaven. Here our ancestors said that Orion represented a star. The 7 stars in Orion represented a star, because the star was the great king that every king wanted to become one with, to be born again, and to the resurrection and to the new life. So we were building heaven on earth, brothers and sisters. This was the spiritual connection that our ancestors were at, connecting the celestial and the terrestrial universe. This was building heaven on earth. That's documented and validated on Amenhotep III's pyramid of the 12th dynastic period. The capstone is in the Cairo Museum, as you see Orion right here. And now we can see a star in Orion, where every king wanted to become one with, and Al-Natek corresponds with the Great Pyramid. And now the text in astronomy is called the Great Light, just like Farrakhan, the Great Pyramid, is called the Great Light. But here our ancestors saw this. It says in the Tammudi text that Ashra said he will build his kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. This is where it was later, the African spiritual mystery system was copied and ended up in St. Luke chapter 11, verse 1 through 13, that our Father, which art in heaven, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Taken from African people's spiritual mystery system, brothers and sisters. Now, this is African people's sacred knowledge and our sacred wisdom, still all around us, but it's locked up and we're unlocking the key. But yet, we find it in Amos chapter 5, verse 8. It says, seeketh him that maketh the 7 stars and Orion. Seeketh him that maketh the 7 stars of Orion, with no other than a star that you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The 7 stars in Orion. That's where we get Amos chapter 5, verse 8. Seeking him that maketh the 7 stars of Orion. This is where it goes back to. This is our sacred knowledge, where every king wanted to be one with a star because he symbolically was born again. They knew that then. That becoming one with Orion, you would be born again. But guess what? National Geographic came out. Orion, where stars are born. National Geographic Society, the heavens, star birth, and Orion's nebula. We already knew that, because that's what we connected every king with a star that you see right here. But National Geographic came out, nothing new under the sun. This is the African spiritual mystery system where stars are born in Orion's nebula that we already knew. Where else do we find the African spiritual system at? Even when NASA came out. And you see NASA, Apollo, NASA symbol, that is Orion. As you see the 3 stars in Orion's belt, 1, 2, 3, and the 7 stars in Orion that's above the Giza Plateau, the African mystery system is tied up into everything. Let's go on to see. None other than Osiris, the constellation of Orion. All this is African spiritual system, brothers and sisters. In fact, you know that we know about NASA having that robot on Mars, but they didn't tell you about the robot that they had inside of the Great Pyramid. No, they didn't tell you about that. They didn't tell you what that robot saw inside of one of the chambers. And they had it on the radio down in Los Angeles, and they were talking. They said, oh, did you see what the robot found in the Great Pyramid? They said, what was it? They said it was a black man. They said, a black man? They said, really? They said, really? Yeah, because that's what that robot saw was a star, where every king wanted to become one with. No, this is not about those spaceships coming here. No, they had nothing to do with that, so get that out of our minds. They had nothing about us having spaceships either. We had a spiritual astral projection to go to the stars spiritually. In fact, that's why you see the logos. Why is that according to a star? Because we had a spiritual connection to take off, not a rocket to take off. In fact, we see that they call them air shafts. There were not no air shafts in the Great Pyramid. These shafts represent spiritual shafts for the king's spirit to go to Orion, that our ancestors called Sahu, and also the king's spirit to go to Septa, called Sirius. Why did they want the spirit to go to Orion and Sirius? Because those 2 stars, Orion and Sirius, that represented the first mother and father in the constellation of Asar and Aset, to become one with the first divine couple in our creation Tepe's story.
Brothers and sisters.
This is where our ancestors have, right here, with that star. Sirius, when it rose, it told the people that Aset was going to come back. This is where we see her rising, even to this day, in the east, where we get the Eastern Star from. Our ancestors carved it on the monuments right here on top of her head. This is where this was corrupted. Now they got a white woman representing your ancestral Eastern Star. They put a white woman in place of it. That's why they give you a sketch, because you had it carved. You had it carved in stone right here with the star on top of her head. This is my mother's an Eastern Star. I had to take her back to show her where they stole it from. In fact, they also have another order, and the order called the Shriners, called the Daughters of the Nile. Now the Shriners, we see that the European Masons, they call the ancient Arabic order of the noble mystic Shriners. But the African-American order is called the Egyptian Arabic nobles of the mystic Shriners. Whereas, in fact, the Arabs took from the African mystery system and made up the order called the Shriners. But yet this all came from the African mystery system of the Nile Valley thousands of years before there was any Shriners even in existence. This is also incorporated to the African mystery system even in Islam. But the West came up with the Shriners through the Knights Templars, who when they were in Jerusalem during the Crusades, this is where they were initiated into some of the African mystery system by way of the Shriners that became the Knights Templars. Others got this information from the Pythagorean order, these Greeks who came in, and became the Pythagorean order and others and so forth, but the order of it came from the African fallopian tube of the African spiritual mystery system of the Nile Valley, but yet every last one of them give credit, meaning Judaism, Christianity, Islam, to each other, but none of them tell them where they got their information from. And I'm saying that none of us should be arguing whether we're Christians or whether we are African Christians or we're African Hebrew or African Muslim. All of that belongs to us in the first place. So you see that the symbols that they even use the African nimbus crown right here. A man by the name of Florence Hopkinson is the one that brought the concept of the Shriners to the West when he also was met with an Arab diplomat, and that's how the Shriners came to the West. But they got an order called the Daughters of the Nile, which is part of the African mystery system of the Eastern Star. But this is where it's corrupted in a satanic origin, where the Europeans are corrupting it, the Eastern Star, and turned it upside down, and have a skull where they drink through the Royal Arch when they become the Royal Arch degree, and the Scottish Rite, they drink from a human skull, a wine, symbolically of the rite of initiation into this Royal Arch order, that they would not give up the secret. That means our African ancestral secret. But the whole denigration and desecration and the satanic part that they've corrupted it into was turning the goddess of Set star upside down. Nowhere you see that star in the temple upside down. So the order of the Eastern Star that they got on the European campuses today, and the order of the Eastern Stars, and some of our people and sisters are Eastern Stars, now they got the star upside down, corrupted it, when in fact when you go back to the temple, nowhere is it upside down. This is the African spiritual system that was taken from African people, brothers and sisters. In fact, when that star rose, it told our ancestors that a set was coming back because it rose in meridian. It turned red, white, and blue. So on all the columns, that's why it was painted red, white, and blue to give an indication that a set, the Eastern Star, was going to come back. So they painted all the columns red, white, and blue. Now you see Uncle Beast, that's how they came up with the red, white, and blue. It ain't none of my uncle, but now you can see where they corrupted it from your African ancestors. That's why they don't want you messing with this. We've got to open up the light of our mind, brothers and sisters. Been locked down to see that this is called the Het Haru. What is the Het Haru? The Het Haru, this temple goes back to a pre-dynastic times, and through dynastic times, many kings built onto it. And you see these massive pylons here. Look how small the people are. Some of our group right here, on this side, not this side. Now you see how large the temple pylons are. The Het Haru is dedicated to Haru, and the symbol is the falcon. Het Haru means the White House of Haru. Corrupted it by the West and America, that's where you get the White House from, the Het Haru, the White House right here. Here you see carved in stone, the falcon, showing Shin's symbol for eternity as Ra will rise to give us life. Now you can see where Francis Hopkinson and others use the presidential symbol. You see in the Het Haru, and right next to your ancestors, carved in stone, somebody knows something about us that they don't want us to know about ourselves. That's why they don't want you messing with Kemet. Here you see it carved in stone in the Het Haru. As we see the Ankh Shu. Ankh Shu means life for eternity, because long as Ra rises in east, we will have life for eternity. We use this zoomorphic zoot type Haru, the falcon, because the falcon flies in the sky all day, just like Ra when Ra rises in the sun. Now you can see it's been corrupted where they got the presidential symbol from now, the eagle, copied from your ancestors' Ankh Shu or Haru right here. Instead, now you see Ra on top of the falcon's head, corrupted to now the Mogan Da'u, or the Solomon seal, with 13 stars. And 13 olive branches, 13 leaves, 13 feathers, 13 arrows, 13 stripes, everything representing 13. Krubus Uman also has 13.
And the 13th Amendment keeps y'all in slavery. Continue.
Light of knowledge for the resurrection to be born again. This is what they're dealing with. And also some say the 13 colonies. But let's look even to this further, brothers and sisters, and see the red, white, and blue and so forth. and the Mogen Da'u, or the Star Solomon Seal. I recently came back from Washington, D.C. I stopped in to see the 33rd degree Grand Sovereign Scottish Rite Temple, stopped in there and looked into their holies of holies that we call the Ankh Manu. They corrupted it, took it from us, but I looked into their holies of holies, and what did they have in red, white, and blue? They had Isis, the Greek name for Set, and they also have Osiris, the Greek name Osiris, the African name Asar, and the Greek name Isis that we call Set. Here you see in red, white, and blue who they're giving homage to. In red, white, and blue, inside of their 33rd degree Grand Sovereign Temple in Washington, 16th Street, Washington, D.C. This is in their holies of holies. Let's go on, look even further to see that here you see the Bennu bird representing resurrection. The east and the west was taken from the Ankar. The Ankar was the lion representing the east and the west, and the rising of Ra in the east and going down in the west into a mentor, into the spiritual realm, and be born again. This is where they took that from, and also from Haru. But yet you see 33rd, we didn't have 33 degrees, a few degrees above reason. We had 360 degrees of spiritual knowledge. This is what African people dealt with. But let's go on and see, brothers and sisters, that the 360 degrees, this was called the Amsu. The Amsu was the resurrection, that you be rise again and resurrected to be born again. But in order to be born again, you had to be on the square. And to be on the square, you had to be in the position of the square representing morality, and also the compass representing spirituality. And you see the falcon bird Haru with one knee down. We did not worship the falcon. It was a zoomorphic type, just like we don't, the United States doesn't worship the eagle either, right? That's the presidential symbol. So these represent the horse king. But to be on the square, one knee down, one knee up, this is the square of morality. One knee up is spirituality. So the Masonic order of the Western world, this is where they get on the square from. Let's go to the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., and who you see George Washington, one knee down, one knee up, copy from your ancestors. Somebody knows something about you, but they don't want you to know about yourself. Oh, they don't want you messing with this. Because I took an oath. I know Steve Copley's against the oath, but I took an African oath right there in Africa that I would sacrifice my life to tell our story. Come up to me and ask me, oh, you're a traveling man. Yes, I've been traveling for 18 years to these. How long you been traveling? Travel back to Africa. That's the true travel. And see it. I was sitting in the Cairo museum, Cairo Hilton. My dude was there in 1985 when a brother came from Yemen and asked me, are you Ashra Kweti? I said, yes, I'm shocked. Brother, nobody, I'm sitting up here in Cairo. And they said, we got your tapes in Yemen. They're magnificent. They're going all over the country. Referring to it, not only that, but the X. Remember the X? For resurrection, is that right? Resurrection, and that was Asar, who was the god of resurrection, the first black god of resurrection, copied from you and sent up in the Capitol building in Valley Forge. They call him the worshipful Grand Master. No, he's not the worshipful Grand Master. The worshipful Grand Master who sit in the east was the great black king. The great black Asar sitting on the square. As you see him with the X, that's been corrupted by George Washington with the X, where they took it from your ancestors. They don't want you to know about these great black kings who were deified as the gods. Let's go on to see the Heka was the ruler of life in the spiritual realm. Why did we use the ostrich crown? Because the ostrich crown represented you, just like the ostrich bird could look 360 degrees all the way around. So Asar could look 360 degrees with the all-seeing eye in the spiritual realm of the omnipotence of the Creator. And also you see him on the square. Let's deal with this square. Because even church wars and signs and symbols, Primordial Man says, much is made in masonry of acting on the square. Here's the foundation of the whole matter. We have no doubt that our saying to act on the square Masonically is from the Egyptians, to act rightly, to act justly and truthfully, according to Ma'an, and working with Ma'an, denotes creation according to their eternal laws and understanding. The square is the seat of Osiris in the judgment hall, from which place all are judged as to the past and must be found perfect before they could succeed further. Symbolically, therefore, it shows that it was first emblematically the seat for judging right from wrong. So to speak, to bring the material into the perfect form and to reject that which was not perfect, and to build on the square. Even the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry has the square. This is one of the most important and significant symbols in Freemasonry. So sitting on the square represented Ma'at. This was part of the African initiation for every king who was a Horus king to sit on the throne, because he was the personification of the Horus king, just like in a presidential system. Every president that comes to the White House, which symbolically comes before the eagle, the presidential symbol. It represents the presidency. So every king sit on the square of Ma'at. He had to be of truth, justice, and righteousness. This was the initiation that took place in Kemet. So just like Khafra, you see him, who's a Horus king, showing the falcon, representing the Horus king, sitting on the square. He had to be a true, just king to sit on the square. Now that's been corrupted with old George sitting on your square. He was not of no truth and justice. Huh? Yes, George Washington, what was he doing? Yes, he was a slave owner, so he's not sitting on the square. He did not have no truth, justice, and righteousness. He's trying to copy, as you see him with the lotus symbol behind the square, but he's copying from the African Grand Master builders like Ursa Ma'at Ra, September Ra, Ramesu Murray Ahmed. Your practice, you can say it too. Not no Ramses II, but yet it was taken from Ramesu. That was the Grand Master of the 19th dynasty sitting on the square of Ma'at, of true justice, because he was a just king that ruled. And no story nowhere that he started no slavery, which I deal with in another lecture. Hopefully we can do it another time. But yet we go on to see that in Psalms chapter 89, we see the African spiritual mystery system. Verse 14, justice and judgment are the habitation of thy throne. Justice and judgment was Ma'at, sitting on the throne of the square that every king had to sit on, as you see her with her feather. This African goddess right here sitting on the square. But the judgment took place with her husband, Tahuti, who also sit on the square. The union of the two of them represented the judgment and the naked scene. Here we see in the naked scene of the judgment, to go into the spiritual realm, the heart had to be weighed with that of the feather. Anu is balancing the judgment of Ma'at right here. We did not worship animals. They represented zoomorphic forms. And here you see Amit looking to see Tahuti writing down the deeds of Oni. No clarity, brother. You're the co-pilot, brother. Here you see Tahuti writing down the deeds of Oni as he lived on earth. And Tahuti is the one that gave us writing. It's Tahuti from the spiritual mystery system. It's Tahuti who gave the great law and also gave the call that a set was going to give forth in Immaculate Conception. But let's go on to see that Haru right here has the key in order for Oni to go into the spiritual realm. As we get in Matthew, that you must have the key to enter the kingdom of heaven, right? But yet, as he comes, and you see in the spiritual realm, all the Nectarus sitting on the square. How many are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Asar is the one who made the judgment that made 13. This is where they created their judicial system off of your African ancestral spiritual system. The 12 jurors, and also the judge makes 13, who that represented Asar. And then you also had to sit on the square. What was the square? That was the witness stand.
Pause. 13, death. They chopped them up, decapitated them, castrated them. 13, death. All right?
You had to be truth of words in order to be on the spiritual realm, as you see like Oni make it into the spiritual realm. That also was incorporated into Christianity, where you see the 12 apostles, and Jesus makes 13.
Foul. Stop. That's one of the biggest lies. I gotta pause it. I hate when people say that. That's one of the biggest Masonic lies out there. They love saying that shit. They love worshiping number 13 because it goes to the 13 bloodlines of the Illuminati, the dragon, etc., etc. Go ahead.
Do we find our African spiritual mystery systematic? That means the scale of judgment and the square and the key. Let's go right on the dollar bill, and you see the scale for judgment and the key, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and the square, copied from your African nectar scene of judgment, the square 13, the key and the judgment. Your system is here. I don't want to hear about that black stuff.
And they use it to enslave black people.
No, they don't want us to open up. They're trying to suppress this knowledge because what happens when you unlock the key, unlock the Western Masonic order, and enter the secret of your ancestral sacred knowledge, brothers and sisters. That is the key. And brothers talk about, I got the secret. You ain't got no secret. The secret is your African ancestral knowledge that you see right here. That was the initiation into the spiritual realm. I've got to be strong with this. I know what I'm fighting. We are in psychologically spiritual warfare. I know, but don't even know it.
Yep.
Let's go look at this now and see that, yes, we see now a white woman represents now the judgment. Corrupted from your ancestors, beautiful African goddess Ma'at. Now they got a white woman, a mutanoid. As I said, don't be saying, see how we do. We don't want to talk about white folks. Talk about us all day long, give us negative caricatures and everything else, making up Hollywood, all kind of negative images on our children. But yet here, this is a corruption from your ancestral story. Here, the Constitution, from when Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, during that time, they saw us as 3/5 of a human being. So this is no justice for us. It's just us, not just us. Where we were not slaves taken from the African continent, we were kidnapped Africans and forced into slavery. When DISINFO came down West Coast of Africa, they brought in guns and rum. And they gave different brothers guns and rum. It worked so well that we forgot about yesterday, and they created to get us out of the inner cities now, Crips and Bloods, and brought in guns and drugs. And then they brought those Sambo Negro Gates out there to corrupt it too. But yet you see, the old George sold Africans or African brothers for burros of molasses. Don't talk to me about he never told a lie, he talked down a cherry tree. Sold our African brothers for burros of molasses, brothers and sisters. This might be a little bit too much for you right here. I don't know if I can deal with all this. Let me leave that alone. Yeah. Images shape our reality. Oh, George, this archdevil. Oh, George, why is his profile fitting that of the oldest African colossal on the planet Earth, built by those African horse kings because they wanted to align themselves with the African civilization, which was the oldest civilization on the planet Earth, that's represented by your African ancestral colossal upon Agag.
And the first enslaved black people.
That's why white folks are up in arms. Brother Mason, look at this. Look at it. Oh, yes, we're having psychological warfare here today. We're going to be Africans when we walk out of here. Let's go on, brothers and sisters. And see, they don't want you talking about this. If we were to go to the Masonry Encyclopedia by Albert Mackey, who's respected for writing Freemasonry Encyclopedia, they knew we were Africans of the Nile Valley. They knew where they were getting the knowledge from because their secret order, they call it the African Architect Order. According to Freemasonry by Albert G. Mackey, the African Architect Order, it says here, that sometimes called the African Builders in French and German. Of all the new sects of modern degrees of Freemasonry, which sprung up on the continent of Europe during the 18th century, there was none which for the time maintained so high an intellectual position as the Order of the African Architects. They know who we were. The secret order was Africans. That's why they did not want you messing with Africa. They had to create the inferiority complex to make us hate Africa, knowing that their secret order of African architect was taken from African people. So when you go and see the African architect of the present-day Masons, like in St. Louis, here you can see they got the step pyramid from Saqqara Imhotep of the African architect Masons, as they said in their Freemasonry magazine. Let's go after this, even the lowest columns and everything. Even if you were to go inside of white folks' Western Freemasonry, here they talk about the first degree, second degree, third degree of entering apprentice, and the third degree is the Blue Lodge, and the Blue Lodge is supposed to be the Grand Master. How can you be a Grand Master in the third degree? Our ancestors said you went to school for 40 years to become a son of light, of 360 degrees of a Grand Master. And now they're going to say third degree? And then they're going to have all these white folks on here. Imhotep's not on here. You got the Scottish Rite Order, and then also the York Rite Order, and the Scottish Rite, York Rite, and the Royal Arch Rite, and Knights Templar make up what they call the 33rd degree. But nothing is on here about Imhotep, Amenhotep, the son of Hapu, May, Penra, African Grand Masters who lived thousands of years before white folks' Western Freemasons. But at the same time, the daughters of the Nile and the Shriners, they use everything of Africa to make up their structure of Freemasonry, but don't give credit to where they stole it from. Let's go look at it. That's why they have the 33rd Sovereign Grand Master, the Order of the Knights Templar. And this is what we follow. Being Mason, following white folks' Western order, and know nothing about Imhotep, nothing about Amenhotep, the son of Hapu, nothing about Sinra, nothing about Sinmut, nothing about May. It's a shame. Let's go on and see, brothers and sisters, that Dr. Ben's book, The African Mystery System Order, showing that the Western symbolism, once we unveil them, we can see our story and the symbolisms all came from African people. Keep in mind, Horn Akin represented what? Ra, the sun. And the compass representing to circumscribe your spiritual way. But now we're told, and Masons are told, and black Masons who know nothing about this, now they get a white god for the architect of the universe. Here's the white god that they worship as the architect of the universe, and I showed you the top. Long before white folks and their Western Freemasonry and some white god represented as the architect of the universe. Let me tell you something, brothers and sisters. Those who circumscribe your circumference determines the diameter of your thinking. So here are Negro Masons who got a white architect god circumscribing their circumference can only talk to you about white folks' masonry and know nothing about where they stole it from African people. He who circumscribes the circumference of your thinking controls the diameter of your thinking. Let's look at this. We're doing no white god. But let's go on to see, brothers and sisters, how we're going to be free worshiping white folks everything that they stole from us and we don't know the origins where it came from. Look at these symbols and see that G, as they say, represents, some say God in geometry, but in fact it represents the Gnostics. The Gnostics were the true Africans who were the sons of light, to open up their minds that they were taking the system from African people. This is where they created their Bavarian society in 1776, the same time that America was created to create the Illuminati that was taken from the Illuminators, the Africans of the Nile Valley. All-seeing eye was the all-seeing eye of Ashra. As I told you, his crown was the ostrich feather because symbolically the ostrich bird would look 360 degrees in the spiritual realm. So that became the all-seeing eye of Ashra, representing the omnipotence, all-seeing spiritual eye. The operative symbol of Masonry was the trowel that they took from African people that they said represents spreading a brotherhood. As I said, they ain't spreading no brotherhood on us. The heart was weighed with that of the feather of Ma'at and the judgment scene. And then also you see when we wrote the first holy works called Per Em Haru, that's why any holy book can sit in the lodge because ultimately they stole it all from African people. And then they came to Africa. Yes, they came in and shook our hands, but it was no brotherhood. It was death and bloodshed. Now we see that the compass is a symbol, operative symbol of speculative Freemasonry that represents spirituality. And the square represents your morality. But the question is, where did these symbols come from? If we look at the square and the compass, these two symbols have been for so long and so universally to combine us, to teach us, as it says in earlier rituals, to square our actions and to keep them within due bounds. This is the symbol that many of you seen everywhere, right? But where did they get it from? This is the plummet, the symbols that were used for building the greatest structure on the planet Earth, like the Great Pyramids and other temples. And the square, and you had to be on the square, and the level is to level your spirituality. So although these are operative stone mason buildings of your ancestors, that speculative Freemasonry uses today to represent spirituality and morality, and the level to level your spiritual ways, but yet these symbols are right there in the Cairo Museum. Still there to show you the symbols that were used for building the greatest structure on the planet Earth, as the plummet as you see right here. But as you take a close look at this, where can we find it at? To show you that all have worshipped our ancestors. All have worshipped our sacred knowledge. And where do you see it now? In the layout of a place called Washington, D.C. Now you see the plummet symbol where they took it right out of the Cairo Museum. Oh, somebody knows something about us that they don't want us to know about ourselves. And the brothers say, I got the secret, I can't give up the secret. Here's the secret, and the layout of Washington, D.C., copied from your ancestors. But in fact, we go on to see, we even got it carved in stone on the head of Haru. That is the White House of Haru, as you see the compass or the plummet and the plumb line coming down.
Well,
Let's go an aerial view of Washington, D.C. now. Washington, D.C. and the plumb line now becomes the Washington Monument.
Is it your ancestors or your ancient slave makers? Just a thought.
Over 3,000 years ago. That's why I spent 19 years of my life, sacrificed everything to do this. Let's go on to see, brothers and sisters, even clearly now you can see Washington, D.C., copied from your ancestors, another look. But let's go even further and see that, yes, I was one in a million in Washington, D.C. In fact, let's keep in mind it was Africans who built the Capitol building. In fact, can you imagine if I showed a little piece of this on that day? Brothers may have tore that Capitol building down. After all, we built the damn thing. So let's go and understand that we were standing right inside of our own African ancestral symbol, but let's not forget that what else took place at that moment.
I gotta point out, this was Farrakhan who brought 1 million men to D.C., and dumb Pharaoh has been spending the last 5 years attacking Farrakhan, who is 85 years old, I believe, no? He's in his 80s. He's born 33. So, yeah, you do the math.
And the area around the White House became the principal slave market, while untold numbers of chain Africans were marched down Pennsylvania Avenue, South Capitol slave pen and auction blocks filled into the backyard of the White House and rang the Smithsonian on the mall. So here you see this was the biggest auction block in America. Where they marched us down the U.S. Capitol building, Pennsylvania Avenue, down to the White House, and Smithsonian Mall was the biggest auction block right here. And the brothers with the chain in the ball. That's why in our psyche with slave and gypsies, you see the brother always walking like this. You think he's cool. That's in our psyche when he's still dragging that ball. That chain ball is still dragging it. That's what chain's back to. Open up our minds. Still dragging that ball psychologically. Even an elephant, you can take an elephant and pin him down after so many years. He can pull that peg up out of the ground, but in his psyche, he can't do it because he's been pinned down to the ground. Same thing with the brother. He's still dragging that slave ball, thinking he's cool, but he ain't cool. His mind is enslaved. Huh? So when you see that brother come and say, brother, get that slave out your mind. You ain't cool. You a slave. Still dragging that ball psychologically. We the elephant of the Grand Master builders. You can't even pull the knowledge up now. It belongs to us. Let's go on even further and see. Let's not forget this black man, Grand Master Benjamin Banneker. He didn't help design Washington, D.C. He designed it because the Frenchmen went back to France. Benjamin Banneker won respect from his contemporaries, from his work in mathematics, engineering, and astronomy. I mean, this was a Grand Master Imhotep in his day. That sable, no calling what it is, that black genius, busied himself in the pursuit of knowledge on the subjects ranging from the movement of the planets and the life cycle with a 7-year circuit. The Benjamin's Almanac was one of the nation's most popular of the testimonies signed by 11 white vouched for a work done by a black man whose father came from Africa. So George Washington got a black man, Grand Master, who knew his African ancestral knowledge to lay out Washington, D.C. But at the same time, we see the Prince Hall Masons, they wouldn't give them a charter. In fact, they shouldn't even ask for George Washington for no charter, because this goes back much further than George Washington and also England's 1770 tea house masonry as well. But yet we respect Prince Hall for calling it the African Lodge. He at least gave us a hint to go back to. In the 1700s, he was saying African, but yet we were not free and accepted Masons, because we were not free and accepted because George Washington didn't accept them. And they couldn't go running around the South without getting kidnapped, and even in the North, and say they were free and accepted because they just grabbed the brother up and put him right on the slave plantation. But yet at the same time, it says the Prince Hall Grand Lodge, Masonic Lodge, named for the Prince, Reverend Prince Hall, founder of Freemasonry among the African Americans. The first Grand Master of the African Masonry was Absalom Jones, organized in 1797 of the Philadelphia's first lodge of the African Lodge of the Freemasons. But yet, if you were to go to the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry, it says that the Negro Masonry. There are Negro Grand Lodges in most states of America, but they are not recognized by the other Grand Obedience. They are all indifferently illegal, in the opinion of the American Masonic jurisdiction. No, the white folks' Masonry is illegal because they stole it from African people. In fact, it says the Masonic yearbook so far, as America is concerned, there is evidence that the 14 Negroes, among whom was Prince Hall, were made Masons on March 6, 1775 in a military lodge of the British Army at Boston, though George wouldn't give them a charge. They applied subsequently for the warrant to England and received it in 1787, being constituted as the African Lodge, number 429, located at Boston. The next event in history with which I am acquainted is that it was struck off the Royal Grand Lodges at the beginning of the 19th century. Having ceased to make its return for a very long time, it had either passed into ambiance or so passed subsequently. In the course of time, it reported a revival in England, but obtained no recognition. And in 1827, it proclaimed independence and reconstituted as the Prince Hall Lodge. And then it issued a warrant in all Negro lodges in the United States. But they originally did not even look at them today as being illegal. Well, they are the illegal ones, but I love this African Grand Master Mason right here, Black Square and Compass, Martin R. Delaney. They call him that militant Master Mason. Martin R. Delaney, an author, physician, and leader before the Civil War. He was an Imhotep during his time. These are black men who opened up their ancestral genetic memory banks and knew that they were the Imhotep. It appeared that the black master's philosophy of Martin R. Delaney is best seen. He writes that the Ethiopians are the leading race of mankind, with the Egyptians as a branch of that race, and further suggests the black origin of Freemasonry. But to deny to black men the privilege of Masonry is to deny to a child the lineage of his own parents, from which sprang Masonry but from Ethiopia and Egypt. I like this what he said. He awoke every morning thankful, he said, that God had made him a black man. All right. That's a true black man right there. We need to wake every day and thank God that made us a black man or woman. He also advocated violence to hold the slave check. But the key, yes, he did, so he was not non-violent. If they committing violence on us, we are spiritual people, African people. We don't commit aggression on no one. But yet we walk with our left foot forward because we must trample down evil for our heart to go forward, brothers and sisters. So we must also, you put your hands on us and disrespect us, we sure are going to disrespect you. It's about respect, not trying to love everybody. Now, we have time to go into the next carousel. All right, you want to take it? So let's go further into this, brothers and sisters. In the West Bank, and this tomb in the early 80s, well, I had to sneak cameras into the tomb. In some places, they don't allow you to take pictures and so forth because it reveals much of where the Western world plagiarized directly from African people. In fact, now you see the ancestors coming up the staircase to heaven. Long before there was a Jacob's ladder, and coming before the great God Ashra, not Peter, sitting at the gate as he judged those who come before him on the square. As he cast out Set, symbolized as the pig, and the Hetan Ra, the sacred baboon, beats the pig, where even Christianity, where Jesus supposedly cast out the swine for those who came before him. Is that right? But where now we see in the Western world, now we see Jacob's ladder was literally copied. Now that's why you always get a sketch. Copied from your ancestors' reliefs, carved over 3,000 years ago. And a SAR at the gate. But as you see T, as you see truth, F for fortitude, P for prudence, J for justice, the scales, and then remember the heart had to be judged on the scale in order for you to go into the spiritual realm. Is that right? How many stars are up here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 stars represented who? That was a line that was no other than a SAR star, and make it into the heavens. So Jacob's ladder, here you see it here, copied from a SAR's ladder that predated Jacob's ladder by thousands of years. Let's look even further and see, that's why you see the masonry that has the ladder. They always show white folks on here, the compass and the square, and the gavel and the square right here, the stone, and the key. The key is to open up the spiritual doorway. But your ancestors, where they get the ladder, the key is opening up our African ancestral knowledge where they stole it from. That's the true key, brothers and sisters. So we're going to unlock and show the key representing to unlock the African spiritual system. This is part of the Western secrecy of Masonry. Let's look at the tracing board. Now you know the secrets. Now you know the acacia tree represented the resurrection of Ashra. Not the physical resurrection, but the spiritual resurrection raised to the perpendicular long before some harem abyss. Now you know the triad or three candles represented Ashra and Aset and Haru. Now you see the operative trowel is another ancestral symbol. Now you know the star of Aset, the eastern star. Now you know the all-seeing eye is Ashra. Now you know the seven candle stars also representing the star. Now you know the ladder. Now you understand the beehive representing the industrious of the Twa and the Pythagorean theorem. You know all of this in the heart, okay, representing judgment. You know all of this now on the tracing board called the tracing board in Freemasonry. We have unlocked the secrets. But yes, we can go back, as I take groups back every year, and see the secret right there in the Cairo Museum. Now you see the trowel where the Western Freemasonry, speculative Freemasonry got the trowel from. Now you see the level of the plummet. Yep. So here you see the gavel, a symbol that was used for the building of the Great Pyramid. Now let's look at this further, brothers and sisters, because in the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry, they call this the harem gavel. The gavel, when wielded by the master of the lodge, is sometimes called harem because as the workmen at the temple were controlled and directed by harem, the chief builder, so the master preserved the order in the lodge by the proper use of the gavel. The wooden hammer used by operative masons to set the stones in their proper position. It is expected to masonry a symbol in the third degree of the blue lodge of the third degree of masonry, reminding us of the depth of the builder of the temple, which is said to have been affected by this instrument. That means Haram was supposed to be hit with that instrument as he was killed, and where Solomon supposedly raised him with the Grand Master's grip when they copied it from Africa. But that had nothing to do with no Haram gavel. Let's go back to the Cairo Museum. That was the operative Grand Master builders of Kemet that used these symbols for building the Step Pyramid, First Stone Building, the Great Pyramid, and many other temples. Long before Harem of Biffa, 900 years BC, these symbols were using to building the Step Pyramid almost 5,000 years ago. But yet we into Western Freemasonry. I'm not talking about all Masons, because many Masons let me come and lecture right in the lodge. I'm talking about the Negro Masons. Always talk about, is he a Mason? No, I'm from the craft of Amun-Ra, not white folks Masonry. All right. So let's go on to see even further, brothers and sisters. Then look at that symbol right there. Let's go now to King Edward VII, as he's called the Grand Master. No, he's the Grand Master Thief of England. But look what symbol, you see him right there. That symbol is right there in the Cairo Museum of our ancestors to show the symbol that they used to build the pyramid. So they use these symbols right here, as it says, the design of the apron has remained practically unchanged through the years. Not through the years, through the millenniums and ages where they copied from the Grand Master, the collar and the apron, copied from Grand Masters like Maruka and others. These were the stone builders with the gavel right here, squaring the stone. There's no spacemen, had nothing to do with no slaves. Where Mackenbaker said he stood there and said his ancestors built the pyramid. Like Michael Bradley said, they may have made Pharaohs, but they had nothing to do with building no pyramids. These were no other than the Hyksos who came in our land and invaded our land. Had nothing to do with no statesmen. These were the Grand Masters wielding the gavel that you see right here from this model where it ends up in European Western Freemasonry, and he calls himself the Grand Master. No, these are the Grand Masters opposite stone squares, showing that this was the stone that squared off the pyramid. These were the Grand Masters. But yet, where do we find it at today? Can we look even further to see the squaring of the stone with the gavel? You know this guy very well. George Washington with the gavel and the squaring of the stone.
George.
Copied from your African ancestors model right here in the Cairo Museum. That's why the Egyptians had to be white. Their whole secret society was based off of this, with a cornerstone for the building of the pyramid now in Western Freemasonry. Many Negro Masons worshiping George Washington, a thief we stole directly from African people.
Alright. So yeah, I just had to put this out real quick. This is just 1/3 of this lecture. I'm watching it just like y'all. You know, I'm not into this, subject, but just want to share this. And again, you have a disinformation agent out there. The dumb Pharaoh tried to say that basically the NOI is down to KKK because some symbols and him and his crackhead boyfriend and his silly lectures. And now, he's got Trump behind him. Can you believe it? Marshall Daniels is leading y'all into martial law. It's not a game right now, y'all. This kid will lie to your face, and that's the point. The point of that video we see he's talking about the SOS, he will lie to your face, and I'm tired of it, man. Alright? So yeah, it's spiritual warfare, and I just want y'all to be prepared. Alright? Peace.